America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, January 30th, 2024. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Diana Buttu, Palestinian analyst and former legal advisor to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Also on the program today, that drone attack that killed three U.S. military personnel followed a mix-up on that Jordanian base as the U.S. contemplates retaliation amid fears it will expand the Hamas-Israel war into a regional one. Meanwhile, a 6-week truce being reportedly negotiated between Israel and Hamas. The Israeli military says it may need at least another year to supposedly do its job. House Republicans are preparing to torpedo that immigration bill. U.S. weapons exports up 50% in 2023. Congratulations to those of you who have made billions. Mike Johnson says he will allow corporate tax breaks for increase in the child's tax credit bill to get a vote. Sports Illustrated union files labor grievance over its mass firings. Meanwhile, Trader Joe's joins Elon Musk, challenging the constitutionality of the National Labor Relations Board. Anti-abortion operatives outlined day one plan for Trump to create a de facto federal abortion ban. And the contractor who leaked Trump's tax returns gets 5 years in prison. And lastly, French farmers lay siege to Paris. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Emma Vigeland, now as we speak, making her way back from her West Coast tour, where she participated in the Bituation Room's San Francisco Sketchfest show. So she will be back tomorrow, right, Bradley?
Yes, she should be back tomorrow.
Okay, yes, she should be. We'll see. Gosh knows what's
the way
going
Bowen's
on
been
there. Exactly. Yeah. We've got a lot to get to today, as we tend to every day. But this clip I thought was pretty funny and worthy of checking out. This is Florida Representative Maria Elvira Salazar. And you see this quite well. There are many instances of this over the years, but it is rare that it's been so stark in terms of Republicans participating in bills that deal with things like infrastructure and whatnot. And you rarely see the news media actually pay enough attention to these things to call people out about it. But as you know, that over the course of the first 2 years of the Biden administration, in addition to the American Rescues Act, there was also this CHIPS bill, which was and if you combine it with the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, you're looking at some government sort of industrial planning bills. And also part of that was not only funds to develop certain businesses, and we've had relatively speaking, I think one of the first sort of eras of a growth in manufacturing in this country for decades. You had money that was set aside both for infrastructure improvements and for building certain industries. Some instances, it was also a corporate giveaway and subsidies. But at least there's some element of industrial planning there. Here is CBS News Miami's Jim DeFeed, I think that's how we pronounce his name, asking Representative Maria Elvira Salazar why she has championed certain initiatives, handing out checks, trumpeting these things, and she had voted against these things. And she is not prepared for this question. It's actually quite funny.
Last month, you were at FIU and you presented a check for $650,000 to help small businesses at FIU. But you voted against the bill that gave the money that you then signed a check for and handed and had a photo op, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2023, right? You voted against that bill.
Right now, you have to give me more details, but I do know that every time I have an opportunity to bring money to my constituents, I do so. I just did $400,000. But look,
you voted against the Chips and Science Act, right?
Listen, right now I need to ask my staff. But what do we look at the $40 million that I have brought to this community? Aren't you proud of me? Aren't you proud of the $40 million that I brought? Aren't you proud that I wrote the Dignity Act? Haven't I?
Climbing over the desk.
Wait a second. Let me 1 second.
Tell me.
The money that you talk about, the $40 million that you bring back to the district, sometimes that money comes from bills that you voted against. You voted against the CHIPS Act, and yet you praise the fact that the South Florida Climate Resilience Tech Hub is going to be started in Miami, right? You voted against the infrastructure bill, and you talk about all the money that comes back to the airport. So at the same time that you're taking credit for the money that you bring back to the district, in Washington, you're voting against these projects on party line votes.
Listen, that was, I think, last cycle. I cannot really remember right now, but let's look at the Americas Act, which is what I'm going to, which is what I would like.
You don't want to explain why you voted against things.
I mean, right now, and I'm not trying to be a politician, there's so many bills that I've introduced that I know that many of them.
Politician would have an answer.
That I understand. But it's okay. Sometimes I vote and sometimes I don't. But let's look at the positive. Let's look at the $40 million that I brought, and let's look at the.
That is. Amazing that there was no hey, you're going on the news. Just in case they ask you how you can celebrate this money after voting for the bill, you got to say, well, I had
concerns about other parts
this
of it
or that in it, and so I couldn't vote for that. But of course, a clean bill I would have voted for, and I still was instrumental in making sure that money was in the bill. And, some a political answer. She had absolutely. Yeah. It is amazing. And I don't think that any of us fully really grasp the level of just sheer incompetence and idiocy that I think the vast majority of our politicians represent. And, so be it. That's the way it is. But it gives you a sense of how relevant the coalitions and the parties and the at any given time the big moneyed constituencies control what they do. She may not even be aware that she voted no on that. She may not even be aware that money came from that bill. It may be completely irrelevant. She's told to vote against this. She votes against it. Or she's not told to. She just sees that that's the way she should do it if she wants to continue to be. Yeah, continued to be, supported by the various sort of institutional support structures. And so she votes against the bill, and then a check shows up, and she knows I've got to present it as if it was my doing. Either way, it gives you an insight into much of this is structural, and much of this is about, the politician itself ends up being the aggregate of all the forces that are acting upon that politician, good and bad.
This woman will also have Maria Elvira Salazar was a White House and Pentagon correspondent for Univision, as well as the senior political correspondent for Telemundo in Cuba.
Wow. I wonder if as a reporter she could have made that connection. That's impressive. But look, be a little more positive. All right.
Aren't you
Just
proud
be a
of
little
me?
more positive. Aren't you proud of me?
That is a hell of a question to ask a reporter.
Oh, boy. All right. In a moment, we're going to be talking to Diana Buttu. She is a Palestinian analyst and a former legal advisor to the PLO. So she can break down the, now that there's been some time to digest it, the ICJ ruling from, I guess it was Friday now. Is that right?
Friday, yeah.
It seems like a long time ago because, of course, we also had this UNRWA. I don't know how to say that without saying the entire agency name, the UN Relief and Works Agency. This accusation by Israel that 12 of its workers 12 of its 13,000 workers participated in the October 7th attacks in one form or another. Those people have been fired to the extent that they're still alive. And the subsequent suspension of funding for an agency that provides about 1 million people housing, temporary housing at this point, and probably more in terms of the food and other aid. We will talk to her about that in a moment. Just first, a word from our sponsor. This is a sponsor we've had some experience with over the years. And at one point, I know they came to us a long time ago, and we couldn't get a taker for taking this. And then we had some around still from that time, and I started taking because I noticed I was getting a little bit of a thinning situation. Coming back from my 40-year anniversary of reunion, I should say, of high school, and I'm doing better than a lot of people on that front. I can tell you right now, and that's what. And the beauty of Nutrafol is that you don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach that for men and for women, but that promotes healthier hair. There's no drugs, no compromises, just better hair. I've been taking it now for well over a year, and I've seen a marked difference in the thinning I was starting to experience. Let's see, I can't even tell right now. I think it's on, no, this side. And it's 100% drug free, has no compromising on your sex life. These are physician formulated supplements. They have a patented technology. It provides consistent, reliable results. And the thing about Nutrafol in their clinical studies is that they're not just studying the different ingredients, they clinically test the final formulations of Nutrafol, and that way they get a better sense of their efficacy. In a clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months taking Nutrafol's men hair growth supplements. You can go over to Nutrafol.com/men, take their hair wellness quiz, and it will give you a personalized hair health plan based upon your specific root causes. No pun intended. With Nutrafol, building a hair growth routine is simple. You purchase online. There's no prescription necessary, no doctor's visits required. Free shipping, automated deliveries ensure you'll never miss a day. You will see results in 3 to 6 months. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand with over 1 million people seeing thicker, stronger, faster growing hair with less shedding. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair for a limited time. Nutrafol offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping When you go to Nutrafol.com/men, enter the promo code TMR. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled Nutrafol.com/men, and enter the promo code TMR. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code TMR. We will put that link in the podcast and YouTube subscription. As always, don't forget, you can get the free show free of commercials by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, but you also get the fun half, and you help this show survive and thrive. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Diana Buttu, Palestinian analyst, former legal advisor to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. We are back. Sam Cedar on the Majority Report. Joining us now, Diana Buttu. She is a Palestinian analyst and a former legal advisor to the Palestine Liberation Organization. Diana, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for having me.
It's been a couple of days now. Opportunity for you to digest, and all of us to digest, the ruling from the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. I want you to talk about the ruling, but can you also just give us a sort of a thumbnail? Like, what is the ICJ? What kind of authority they have, and under what auspices was it created?
Okay, so the ICJ it's another word for the World Court. And it's a branch, the judicial branch of the United Nations. And so what it deals with is cases that are between different states where there are legal disputes. And it also deals with questions that are put to it, legal questions that are put to it by the UN General Assembly. So there are two types of cases that can come forward: a state-to-state case, and another type of case, I'm being very general here, but another type of case where there is a question about the legality of something. And so this court is the highest international court. Its rulings are final. And under the rules of the ICJ, all of the nations have to abide by the rulings of the ICJ. And if they don't, they can go to the United Nations Security Council to get some enforcement mechanism. So overall, it's really just the World Court.
Okay, and there are 17 justices that adjudicated this case brought by South Africa, or are in the process, I should say, of adjudicating it, because this was a sort of almost a preliminary judgment. How are those justices picked, and do they rotate? What are their terms, et cetera?
Yes. So the justices are picked through the UN General Assembly, and they have to be confirmed. Their term is for a period of 5 years, and they can be reappointed. So on February the 6th, 5 of the 15 judges are going to be retiring. It's actually really only 4, because one of them has been reappointed for yet another term, including the judge who is from the U.S. the person who actually read out the decision. She will be leaving the court on February the 6th.
This is Donahue, right? She was a former
yes.
State Department
former
official.
State Department. Yes. And so it's not a political court. It's a legal court, and it's supposed to be treated as a legal court. Now, there's only 15 judges, by the way. There are then when there's a dispute involving two countries, then they also appoint a judge from either of the two countries where there's a dispute. So in this particular case, because it was South Africa versus Israel, a South African ad hoc judge was appointed, and an Israeli judge was also appointed on an ad hoc basis. And this is important because when you look at how this ruling came out, you saw that of the permanent judges, of the judges who are not ad hoc, 14 of the 15 ruled in favor of South Africa. I mean, that's the equivalent of a slam dunk, really.
Were you surprised? I mean, I want to go through obviously what they found, but I mean, in all of the pre-judgment analysis I heard, even regardless of where these people were in terms of what they thought the outcome should be, I didn't hear anyone even come close to predicting that we would see 15-2, 16-1 on these really significant questions and rulings. Were you surprised by the unanimity?
No. And the reason I wasn't surprised is because the South Africans did a fantastic job presenting their case, and even worse, the facts really speak for themselves. I live in Haifa. I'm 180 kilometers away from Gaza, and I used to live in Gaza. I have many friends in Gaza, and every day we see the images of what Israel is doing in Gaza, and so and you hear the statements of UN statements of what's happening there, of the dire situation. But also, from my standpoint, I also hear what Israeli politicians are saying on a daily basis, and so it wasn't at all surprising for me that the court found the way that they did, and it's not at all surprising that they found with the unanimity that they did. I wasn't at all surprised by the Israeli judge. Having seen him operate here in Israel, I know the way that he acts, and so I wasn't at all surprised because the situation really is dire, and South Africa presented a very strong case. Sadly, because the facts are so strong.
Walk us through now walk us through what the court could have ruled at this time, because ultimately the question of whether Israel is engaging in genocide is going to take years to deliberate. But this ultimately was almost like a preliminary injunction type of hearing. And so what could they have decided? And then tell us what they ultimately did.
Okay, so I can tell you what they couldn't have decided. And that's, I think, the thing that has been bothering people the most, and that is ceasefire. They couldn't come out and say ceasefire. Why? Because that can only come at the end of a hearing, at the end of a determination as to whether Israel is carrying out a genocide. At this point in time, what South Africa was saying and what they were seeking was, they said, there is enough information out there to say that that there is risk of genocide. And so if there's risk of genocide, the world community must act in order. What they could have done, and what they actually did do, is to order measures to prevent genocide. And that's why they listed out 5 main measures that must be done. The first one is they ordered the Israeli government to do everything in its power to prevent genocide. They then ordered the this be translated to the military as well. They then ordered that evidence be preserved. They ordered that effective humanitarian aid be provided on an urgent basis. And they ordered that those who are making genocidal statements face some level of prosecution. And so 4 of the 5, Sam, the first 4 that I enumerated, 4 or 5 that I listed, is really a ceasefire, but by a different name. Ceasefire is something that is applied when there's war. Preventing genocide and listing out what needs to be done to prevent genocide is what's done when there's fear of genocide. And that's what they ordered. You know, it's also important to bear in mind that in other similar cases like Myanmar, the court came to a similar decision, also did not order ceasefire in that context either. So what they did is the issue, the order that it issued is so wide-ranging that the world should be reading this as a ceasefire. Now, more importantly than that, genocide isn't just like other international wrongs or other wrongs that are committed by states. Genocide is a wrong that's committed by a state that requires that all of us act individually and collectively. So unlike in other disputes where there might be war doesn't require us to individually and collectively stop war. But genocide does, because it's considered the worst of crimes in the international legal system. And so this order doesn't just bind Israel. It also becomes imperative upon everybody, like all countries, to make sure that genocide gets prevented.
I want to get to that third party obligation and sort of the legal basis of that, because presumably it's like if you're a member, if you subscribe to the authority of the ICJ, that there are certain obligations that you in that subscription that you assume. But let's get to so that there's clarity. I think there is often the concept of genocide is misunderstood as being specifically about, killing. A diminishment of numbers, period, end of story. You need to kill everyone who's associated with a group for it to qualify as genocide. And that's not the case. Can you give us the legal definition of genocide? And it is one that came in the wake of the mass murder of Jews during the Holocaust, and was formulated in 1948 in a specific Genocide Convention. Can you outline those to us so that people can understand the threshold that the court was addressing?
Yes. So people often assume that genocide equals killing. And I understand why people view it in that way, but that's not what genocide is. So genocide it has to have 2 elements to it. The first is that there has to be an intention, and I'll talk about that in a second. But then coupled with the intention has to be something that a state is doing. And the something has to be acts that lead to killing members of the group. I'm just reading this off so that I don't get it wrong. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life that are calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, or imposing measures that are intended to prevent birth within the group. So it's this idea of it doesn't just have to be killing, but it can be the destruction of the group through bodily harm, the destruction of the group in terms of preventing birth. It's the physical harm. And as I said, there's 2 elements to it. There's the actual act, but then there's the intention. And in most genocide claims, it's hard to prove intention. In this particular case, that wasn't a hurdle, because on all levels of society, of government, excuse me, as somebody who lives here, I can tell you, we've heard it day in and day out since October the 7th. And that was really important for the court, because the court actually read back many of the statements that have been uttered. And these are, again, uttered not by like a soldier in the field, but by high level officials who can influence the actions of soldiers. And in this particular case, they read out the statements from the Minister of Defense, who talked about cutting off fuel, water, electricity, and food supplies. The president, who said that there were no innocents in Gaza, and another minister who also issued some quite genocidal statements. And in sum total, they said, we've seen both the intention and the acts. And it's not just the killing of, we're now close to 30,000 Palestinians that we know about.
Right.
But if you couple the 30,000 with the more than 70,000 who've been injured, very seriously injured, plus the destruction of Gaza, it makes the case.
And let's talk about that third party obligation, both in the context of the ICJ ruling, but also I know that there's a case in Oakland right now being brought by the U.S. Center for Constitutional Rights that is implicating the Biden administration because they are enabling Israel's what was found to be at least enough of a genocidal intent that the court felt obligated to say, you got to stop doing it. We're enjoining you from doing this, and preserve evidence, frankly, that the Biden administration would have culpability within the context of that. Where does it stand within the context of the ICJ, and where does it stand under the context of U.S. law?
Okay, so international law is this weird. It's this weird body of law. It's there's no enforcement mechanism. There's no like police force. There's no. It's not the same as regular laws. The way that international law works is by consent of states. So a state has to agree to be bound by a treaty, convention, which is just another way of saying contract. So if a country wants to sign on to a treaty, they agree to be bound by it. But, and that's the way that it generally works. But then there are some laws that it doesn't matter if you've signed on to the convention, if you signed on to the treaty. They're kind of like supra laws that bind every state. Genocide is one of those. So it doesn't matter whether a country is signed on to the Genocide Convention. Because genocide is so heinous, it binds all countries. So whether they've signed on to this treaty or convention or not. And so the third state responsibility rests with each and every state. And in particular, now that we have this provisional measure, this interim decision that came out from the ICJ, it's placed not only Israel on notice, but it's placed every other country on notice as well. And this is where it's now going to become very important for people to be pushing to make sure that genocide doesn't happen or doesn't continue. And that's through things like pushing for arms embargo, pushing to hold Israel accountable, pushing for people who have made these genocidal statements and who've carried out some acts to be held accountable as well. And then there's other measures like through boycotts, through divestment, through sanctions. There's a whole host of measures. And it's because genocide binds all of us, and all of us should be compelled to stop it. And that's why this case is happening by the Center for Constitutional Rights, because again, it's the idea that genocide is one of these supra laws, that it doesn't matter who is signed on to it. All that matters is that it obligates all of us.
In the U.S., if I'm not mistaken, it has signed on to the Genocide Convention.
Yes.
I think it was in the 80s, early 80s, under Reagan. It seems to me that there's also like different types of culpability based upon obligations, right? Like we have, on one hand, the U.S. is providing weapons that are being used in, what the ICJ found could potentially be a genocide. Certainly, the intent is there and the acts carried out. But it also, the ICJ also required Israel to take measures to improve the humanitarian situation for Palestinian civilians. Within moments of the ICJ ruling, Israel accused 12 employees of, and I had mentioned to you that I have trouble saying this, UNRWA, the UN refugee and works agency that provides half of the population in Gaza right now with some form of temporary housing, provides probably more than, that million people with whatever food or water they have access to, among other things. They accused, and there's, if I'm not mistaken, 13,000 employees, 12 of them of participate in the October 7th attack. The agency immediately fired I think there was 9 that are still alive. But the idea that these different countries would suspend their aid, it seems to me, like, just with my limited legal understanding, if you have taken upon yourself to fund an agency and that agency is really established as now the only entity that can provide the aid that is necessary, and then you suspend it, you are making that deliverance of that aid almost impossible at this point, because you can't come in there and create another agency of 13,000 people. That's not going to happen right now. Certainly not in this. I don't know what it would take in a non sort of like assault situation, but it's just not possible. And that is obvious. And there's a concept under the at least U.S. Civil law that when you decide to take upon an action, you have certain higher responsibility than if you had never engaged in it at all. And so how is the suspension of this aid not on its face a violation of the ICJ ruling?
Good question. I think that's what you're going to have to ask the White House, because I agree with you 100%. And you don't need to be a lawyer to understand that. The UNRWA not only is providing assistance, but it's providing shelter. There are Palestinians who have been sheltering in UNRWA schools since the beginning, and at some points in time, we're providing aid and assistance to individuals. It is the largest aid agency that is in the Gaza Strip. And so cutting funding to UNRWA can only be viewed in a way of cutting assistance, much needed humanitarian assistance to people, particularly in the aftermath of hearing an ICJ ruling. So I don't know how they're going to try to spin this. And, Sam, there's things about this that are very troublesome. These accusations come out and there's no investigation. It's just immediate cutting off of aid. But more importantly than that, we've seen actual war crimes being committed. If anybody's been paying attention to what Israel's been doing, you watch it, you see it on a daily basis. And I don't hear any discussion in the US on a political level, that is, of cutting off assistance to Israel. And if they do, it's always, we first need to investigate. For example, in May of 2022, a friend of mine, a journalist, Shireen Abu Akleh, who worked for Al Jazeera, she's an American citizen, and she was reporting from Jenin. An Israeli sniper shot her in the back of the head and killed her. And to this day, nobody's ever been held to account for Shireen's killing. And yet I still don't hear anybody talking about holding Israel accountable, cutting off any aid, cutting off any, it's as though it was okay to kill her. And it's not okay to kill her. But this is the problem with this approach that successive US administrations have taken when it comes to Israel, which is that Israel can do no wrong. And when Israel shows itself for what it is, it's, again, we just turn a blind eye, or even worse, try to somehow justify it. So even with this ICJ ruling, even though the court is clear, the US tried to spin it as somehow that this is along the lines of what the US has been calling for, but it's not. It's not along the lines of what the US is calling for. The US has been Israel's enabler. It's been Israel's defender. It's been Israel's bully when it comes to being in the UN Security Council.
And maybe this is outside your portfolio, but the timing of these accusations. I mean, even if one was to stipulate that these accusations may be true or are true, I would contend the idea of holding an organization that large for what 12 people did is absurd. It's unprecedented. We've not seen that, certainly within the context of American society, and never mind in any other society. That seems to be unprecedented, even if we stipulate the accusations are true. The timing of it, the speed, as you mentioned, in which you had 5 countries, I think it is, suspend their funding. These were the major funders, U.S. being chief among those, seems to have been, this is the way that we bury the ICJ rulings, that ultimately the power of the ICJ ultimately lies in the political response by these countries, which is also a function of their domestic politics and people hearing these rulings and having a different perspective on what's going on there than they had prior to that. I don't know, the only thing that remains, it seems to me, is the ICJ's sort of enforcement, and they're requiring Israel to do what over the next, my understanding is 25 days or 30 days at this point. And then what happens at that point?
So, I share your opinion. I don't think that the timing was coincidental. I don't think that it was just a coincidence that they revealed this. And I think that the reason that it's not coincidental is because Israel's been trying to bury the ICJ decision. They know that this was a blow to them, that this is a huge loss. And as much as they've been trying to spin it, they know that they can't. They're now in the same category as other genocidal, other states that have been accused of genocide. Myanmar, Rwanda, former Yugoslavia, Cambodia, Germany. And that doesn't sit very well with them. So one of the ways of doing away with that is to pivot and try to change the conversation to be about something else, which is why they focused on UNRWA. And, UNRWA, I don't know how much you know about this, but this has long been the issue that Israel's tried to try to do away with. Because in their minds, if they get rid of UNRWA, UNRWA was established in the aftermath of the Nakba, 1948, and it's supposed to provide for Palestinian refugees until they're able to go home, until a solution is provided. And so in Israel's mind, if they get rid of UNRWA, it gets rid of the Palestinian refugee issue. It doesn't, but that's the way that their logic is working. But to take it forward so it's not at all surprising that they tried to go after it. This is one of the first things that when Trump was in office, that the Israelis pushed for was for Trump to cut funding to UNRWA, and he did. And I think
there's been a long-standing attempt to get rid of Anwar. The biggest critique of Anwar that I have seen that sort of pre-existed this latest accusation was that the agency was being accused of maintaining the Palestinian sense that they were refugees. Like as if it was their, well, yes, but it was as if like we are criticizing this agency for not depoliticizing essentially, and for not decontextualizing the situation that the Palestinian people find themselves in. And it is if you maintain a 30,000 foot perspective on that critique, there's some wiggle room. But when you start to drill down into what the critique actually is, it's rather shocking in some way. I mean, it's almost as if like, they want UNRWA to be a pacification tool of some sort, and they're mad that it's not.
Exactly.
Precisely. And so, okay, so they come back to the ICJ supposedly with a report.
Right. So I was going to get to that. Yes. Okay. So you're right. I think it's now 25 days. The Israelis have to report back, stating what measures they've taken to implement the 5 elements that I talked about earlier. And from there, if nothing has been done, it can go to the Security Council. Now, there might be a ceasefire in the interim period. I don't know. One thing that it's important, and I think before I continue, it's important to state, law is never going to replace politics. And the legal system is always going to nudge politicians. It's always going to nudge activists in the right way, but it's never going to replace that. And so I say this because as much as Israel might do, at the end of the day, it's going to most likely end up in the UN Security Council with a question of whether the US is going to use its veto in the Security Council to once again protect Israel. Not a good look. Or whether it will abstain from condemning Israel. Again, not a good look. Or whether it's going to vote in favor. And the reason that I think that this is where we're going to end up is if you just look at what's happened since the ICJ ruling, if you just look at what's been going on in Gaza for the past few days, Israel's still killing Palestinians at the same pace. And aid is not being allowed in. And the military is still behaving the same way that it was behaving before. There isn't an attempt to preserve evidence. In other words, nothing that the ICJ has requested has actually been done. And, and this, if I may, I want to pivot to something to show the interplay between law and politics. Because back in 2004, this isn't the first time that Israel is before the ICJ. It's the first time when there's a case that's a dispute. But back in 2004, I was actually part of the team that worked on the case where it was a legal question about whether Israel's wall is legal. And that came out in 2004.
And this is the wall that runs along the West Bank.
That's right. Runs right inside of it. Okay. It runs inside of it. In some places, it's a concrete 25-foot high wall. In some places, it's barbed wire with roads and takes a large, like maybe about 50 feet of land. But it snakes through the West Bank. It's not like it's just all through the West Bank. And it separates Palestinians from Palestinians. It's a terrible structure, and has just caused so much havoc and so much death and theft of land. And it really just goes around the settlements, keeping the settlements, pushing the settlements onto the Israeli side and putting Palestinians behind a wall. And in 2004, we took Israel to the ICJ. And in that decision, the court came out and said, same numbers, by the way, but it was a different composition, same numbers saying the wall is illegal and that the wall should be removed. Here we are 20 years later, the wall is still standing. Now, in the ruling, the court said, not only did they say the wall is illegal, but they said third states also have a responsibility when it comes to the wall. Again, this isn't genocide, but it's a wall. And what happened is for a year, we waited and waited and waited and thought, okay, now the world is going to do something about it. And as I said, law doesn't ever replace politics. And the world did nothing. But exactly 1 year to the day of the ruling. So the ruling came out July the 9th of 2004. July the 9th of 2005, the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement was launched. And the reason that it was launched is because they said, we've been waiting for the international community to step forward and do something. And we don't see that that's coming. And so we as activists are going to start pushing and pressuring Israel and pushing and pressuring the world to hold Israel accountable. And so even if Israel comes forward in its 1 month time, now 25 days time, and I know what this report is going to look like, it's going to be a nothing report because they have nothing positive to report on. And even if the US vetoes, again, not a good look, or abstains, not a good look, I do think that this is going to lead to a greater push for grassroots activism to hold Israel accountable, whether through pushing for arms embargoes, pushing to hold these criminals accountable, you name it. And that's where I think the hope is going to lie.
You mentioned you're in Haifa, and you both mentioned, like, sort of the ruling from the ICJ validated what you see, and certainly I know that what we see in this country, my understanding is in the context of Israel, there is both a censorship regime and almost a sort of internalized censorship by a lot of the media as to what's going on in Gaza that we in the United States have more access to, both in part because folks I think are a little bit more invested in seeking it out as opposed to avoiding that stuff. But I wonder, what your sense of that is, like how much, because we've seen the polling out of the Israeli population. Very, they may have grave issues with Netanyahu, but it is not over what's happening in Gaza. Quite the opposite, or in spite of they seem to largely support what's happening in Gaza. I wonder, your sense of that, how much of the Israeli population is exposed to what's going on there, either because they don't have access to it or they don't want access to it. And I also wonder the response to the ICJ ruling, if that moved the needle within the context of that society.
It's a great questions, and the answer is it's mixed. So, Israelis have the same access to internet that I do, to watch Al Jazeera. You don't even need to speak Arabic to understand what's happening and see the images. They have the same access to it. They have the same access to the people on Instagram that I do. And so some of them just don't want to see it. Now, I'll talk about the mainstream Israeli media, and then I'll talk about what Israelis are doing. So mainstream Israeli media, it sort of starts the same every day. They start off with reciting the names of Israeli soldiers who have been killed and a little bit of a biography. And then they'll show you images inside Gaza, but you don't see people. You just see shooting. You just see like tanks. You see some level of destruction, but you don't see humans. You don't see Palestinians. And then from there, it pivots to somebody usually making some crazy statement like, we have to hit them harder, faster, more. There should be 100,000 killed by now. This is an actual statement. And then you're in this up and down, up and down, up and down. And then it pivots to like critique of Netanyahu, but then goes back to the same thing of we need to hit them harder and more and that sort of stuff. And that's mainstream media. But as I said, like it might be censored on the mainstream media in terms of the images that they see, but I have the same access that they do. And so a lot of it is that they don't want to see what's happening to Palestinians. And this isn't the first time. War is not only big business in Israel, but it's lucrative for the politicians. There is yet to be a war in Israel over the past 2.5 decades where it's changed public opinion. It's the opposite. Unpopular leaders, if they attack Gaza or if they attack the West Bank or if they attack Lebanon, their popularity goes up. And so it's this weird phenomena where it's not weird, but this is what Israel is. It's that as much as they're critical of Netanyahu, they're not at all critical of the war, not at all. And the overall refrain that I hear every day is, and you see it on posters everywhere, finish them, aka Nikki Haley, written in English, by the way, to things like screw them, to flatten Gaza. This is the prevalent feeling here, and very little introspection about what it means to be Palestinian. In terms of the ICJ, again, mixed. The Israelis came out immediately and said, oh, the ICJ ruled in our favor. It didn't. And then there has been some media that said, hey, we're now in the category of these other countries. Maybe we should be easing up. But still, what's missing in all of this is a sense of what the devastation and the long-term impact of what they've done on Gaza. And that part, I don't think there's been any real introspection about.
Diana Buttu, Palestinian analyst, former legal advisor to the Palestine Liberation Organization. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Our heart goes out to you and what's happening in Gaza right now. And hopefully, there is something brewing in this country that will at least get the Biden administration to begin to exert what I think is a tremendous influence that they probably have over the Israeli government, at least in terms of how much weapons that they have been, the pipeline that has been going there. But really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show free of commercials, but you also get the fun half, and you allow this show to survive and thrive. Our members really do make it possible for us to know day in, day out that we're going to have a support for the show and keep on keeping on, I guess. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Bradley, ESVN back on Thursday, right?
That's right. Yes. When Emma returns from her West Coast jaunt, we will have an episode on Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. to round up the conference championship weekend and look towards the Super Bowl in a few weeks.
We may wade in today. I know this is ESVN territory, but we may wade into this burgeoning scandal that is unfolding, this sort of like rolling coup that we're seeing that involves Taylor Swift. And is it Kelsey? Is he
Travis Kelsey? Yeah, no, you mean the
psyop. Is he a tight end for the Chiefs?
He's a tight end for the Chiefs. That's right.
Yeah. And it's pretty obvious what's happening here, which is why all of these right wingers have signed on to it. It is incredible. Both how bat crap crazy some people are in this country, and B, how completely shameless folks like Vivek Ramaswamy and I don't know, Tim Pool and others are in promoting this theory for money. The combination of both complete shamelessness and assumption of utter stupidity and insanity on behalf of their audiences is fascinating to me. It really is. It's like when you see these people talk about it, well, we'll get into it later, but when you see these people talk about it, what you're seeing is like, you're seeing the reflection in a mirror, or like you're seeing like a shadow. And the thing that's the initial object that's creating that reflection, or that initial object that is creating that shadow, just may be so disturbing.
I remember we were talking about with Rogan when Matt was like, sometimes it's as if Rogan is just getting stoned and having a panic attack and we're just hearing it. It feels a lot like that. Like, these guys are so perturbed by the relationship that they are just literally having a meltdown psychiatrically in regards to it, and how they're basically processing how much they can't stand this celebrity couple. It's unbelievable. Matt, Left Reckoning.
Yeah, Left Reckoning tonight. We have 2 interviews talking with Branko Marcetic on kind of a postmortem. I don't know if the body's still like kind of alive. On Nikki Haley's campaign.
Are you kidding? Hey. Oh, you haven't heard the song, dude.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's true. We hadn't heard the song.
You haven't heard the song. You don't know what you're talking about.
Also, Ben Fong has a new podcast out, and we'll be talking about the Texas border stuff. So tonight, that's at 7:00 Eastern time at the Left Reckoning YouTube channel. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel, everybody.
All right, folks. We'll take some phone calls in a moment once we get in there, but you can write this number down, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Cedar! What a fucking nightmare!
We bring back DJ Dinner.
Yeah, or a couple of them, just put them in rotation.
DJ Dinner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
See white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them. Oh. Snowflake says what? What? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?